Some criticised the combat system of the original Fable as being a wee bit too complex and tricksy. Some also say that the combat system for Fable 2 has been simplified. Simplified. Is that the right word?
The word simplify sounds like it is being dumbed down. It isn't. It is infinitely more complex than it was in Fable 1. Infinitely more complex.
The most important thing that developers can do nowadays is realise they're making an entertainment. They're not going up head to head against the player. They're not trying to say, I'm better than you, Mr. Player. We will beat you. Ha ha ha. You will put down this game because it is too hard for you. It's a silly attitude.
But all we've done is we have made it more accessible. So what we've done, we've put swords on the blue button, guns on the yellow button, and magic on the red button.
Having the one button combat, you can get into the depth of it if you're that kind of a player, but I know that I can hand that controller to my mum. She'll be able to press the button and she'll be able to engage in those fights and it won't feel that difficult.
There's nothing wrong with making something which is deep and giving a lot of variety when you've learned the system and you've got on with it a bit. But to sort of throw you into the deep end and say, okay, there are 12 buttons for combat because we're going for realism, that doesn't really do anything for the player at the end of the day. They normally just end up whacking everything at the same time and it just seems very confusing. So if we're trying to encourage people to play games who've never played games before, the best thing to do is say, well, here you go, we've simplified the basic control system. Now, once you're used to it, there's an awful lot more depth for you to explore if you really want to.
So how in Albion can you make deeper combat with 3 button presses?
How you press those buttons, whether you tap them, hold them, hit them with rhythm, is up to your choices in the game. And how you combine them together, whether you shoot someone, then hit with them with a sword, then hit with them with magic, whether you use your dog in conjunction with the combat, whether you use the environment in the combat, all affects your final score in each one of your battles.
If you don't, that's fine, not a problem. You can still complete the game, you just won't have as much fun maybe as somebody who's gone and really researched all of the different moves and whatever.
But the complexity of the combat is down to you. I have seen people fight and I've been amazed by what they do.
And an example of a more complex combat encounter would be...
Let's say you're wandering through the woods and you're jumped by 5 people at the same time. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can approach this. One of the most favoured ways, I think, is to use something like slow time. Slow time down with a tap of one button, then start picking off people with the ranged weapon and then mopping up any remaining enemies using a sword.
The spell is going off, and as this spell is going off, you're able to use your melee skills and your range skills.
That's literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now the way you're holding your stick and where you are will change exactly how this all ends up, but if you're having to describe to somebody how you do this, very easy indeed. There's a lot of complexity in there with just 3 buttons.
3 buttons, we got you. But the combat system wasn't just created so Granny could play single-player campaigns. It also stemmed from Lionhead's conception of the game's co-op mode.
We wanted Fable to be one of the first games that had true dynamic co-oping. And what that means is, at any point you can play throughout the story or throughout you playing the game, you can ask someone to join your world, whether that would be from live or whether it be in your house with 2 controllers. We had to have a combat system, and in fact the whole game itself, which allowed those 2 sets of people to play together. So hardcore gamers versus novice casual gamers.